Hey guys, the Brotherhood Ballad is back after a long way to return. I'm one of your co-hosts, Alex Johnson.
And I'm Justin Rombough, your other co-host.
Today we are going to be doing a March Madness kind of preview, going over each region of the bracket and kind of talking about each game and giving our predictions of each game and how the bracket's going to unfold.
I'm looking forward to it. We got some great predictions ahead, so this will be fun.
I think there's going to be some more upsets this year than other years. I like the way that each region has been playing out up to this point.
Oh, yeah. So to start it off, I personally don't see any one seeds losing in the tournament. Last year we had Purdue getting upset by Fairleigh Dickinson. So to start off in the East region, UConn, Stetson, I think you can write in UConn. Personally, I just think they're one of the best teams in the tournament. They might be my favorite to win, but you got to stay tuned to the end of this video to see who we think is the winner. And then next up in the 8-9 seed, those are always a toss-up. Florida Atlantic, Northwestern. You got Florida Atlantic. You got John L. Davis. He's a great shooter. Northwestern, Boo Buie. Who do you have winning that?
See, I'm going back to your original comment of none of the one seeds losing. I don't think North Carolina is deserving of a one seed, considering their strength of schedule and the teams that they've faced throughout the year. I think teams like Iowa State, I think teams like Creighton, I think those two teams have, a better shot at, or a better overall record of why they would deserve a number one spot. And so I disagree with the one seed losing. I could see North Carolina losing to the winner of their playing game. Even Purdue, Purdue is known for not being a good team at the one spot, and so I could see there being two upsets at the one spot. But going back to your original question, I kind of like Northwestern. I think the challenges that they faced in the Big Ten is better than the teams that Florida Atlantic have faced. So on that game, I'm giving my pick to Northwestern.
Fair enough. I think that'll be one of the best games on Friday. Next up, we have San Diego State and UAB. The 5-12s are always a toss-up, it feels like, just because 12s have been notorious for winning. I don't see that in this case, for the East region. I think San Diego State will pull away. Next up, we have Auburn and Yale. Yale had that buzzer beater in the championship of the Ivy League against Brown. But I think Auburn, they won the SEC. I believe they're on a roll. I think they'll just be too tough for Yale to handle. What do you think about that?
Yeah, looking at those previous two matchups, the 5 and 12 is always fun, but I kind of agree with you here. I think San Diego State should have this. I think they're just too tough of a matchup for UAB. Auburn and Yale. That SEC championship was a good game. I like Auburn. I like what they have to give against Yale. Ivy League schools generally don't produce the best talent, so I think Auburn's just going to be too much for them. And then looking at that BYU game versus Duquesne.
Yeah. They won their conference championship.
VCU.
Yeah. So a 6 versus 11, that's pretty much close to a 8-9 or 7-10. So I think I'm leaning BYU, but I could be influenced for Duquesne.
Yeah, see, I'm going to have to disagree with my co-host here. I mean, I know BYU's in the Big 12, but I think they're a little bit of a fraud. I don't think they have very good interior defense. I don't like the way that they play on the perimeter. And so I think this is an upset alert. And so for you guys that are on DraftKings, that 64% boost for one game upset, I think this might be one of the games that you should consider betting the upset.
A game that I like, we'll get to soon with the Drake Washington State. It is a 7-10, but as we went to earlier in the season, Drake is for real. So they could definitely be. I'm just picking them over Washington State now, but the game before then is Illinois versus Morehead State. Illinois has Terrence Shannon. He's a really good scorer. I think there'll be too much to handle, but it'll be closer than the experts think. It'll be really close. And then as we go to the last section in the East region, Iowa State, number 2 seed. Some feel they got hosed for the number 1 seed. They're going against South Dakota State. I think you can just ride in Iowa State. And then if we have Iowa State and Drake, that's an all Iowa round 2. So who do you think would win in a Drake-Iowa State round of 32 game?
Yeah, I like that. I like that matchup between those two teams. I think going back to what you had mentioned earlier, that Washington State Drake game. Although I think Drake can, even though they're the 10 seed, they have a 2.5 spread or 2.5 point spread favorite as of now, according to DraftKings. There's a reason why that they're favorite, even though they are a lower seed than Washington State. They're playing in Omaha, which is, essentially a home game. Their point guard, Tucker DeVries, who is one of 4 players in Missouri Valley Conference to win back-to-back Larry Bird Player of the Year awards, had said on the Selection Sunday show that the chance that he has to play in Omaha has meant everything to him, and so I just don't think that Washington State coming back into different time zones and playing a Drake team who's motivated after winning back-to-back Missouri Valley Conferences against Indiana State, who was a very good team this year, and who, in my personal opinion, got dogged out of the March Madness tournament. I just think Drake's going to be too much for them. I think with Tucker DeVries, I think with their big man 51, I think they've got too much for Washington State to handle and be ready for. And so, knock on wood, Iowa State is notorious for choking when they've got the, like a 1 through 5 seed. So, assuming that all goes to plan, we're going to have ourselves an Iowa State Drake matchup in the round of 32. And being completely unbiased, I think Iowa State has a genuine chance of taking it all the way to the Elite Eight, where they'll probably have to face the reigning March Madness champions in UConn. So at this time, I'd have to, say that Iowa State is one of my teams to make it to the Elite Eight as of now.
I would have to agree with you. As we look at the East region, we had Duquesne as the upset over BYU as one of the main upsets, and then I think we both agree that Illinois is just too much to handle for Morehead State. Things can happen, but if all goes to plan as the way we see it, I think Iowa State could get past Illinois and make it to the Elite Eight. Looking at the top of the bracket, I think UConn will just be too much to handle for San Diego State or Auburn or whoever comes out of those specific points. UConn, Iowa State in the Elite Eight. I think I would just have to go with UConn. I think they're the most talented team in the country. If Iowa State, you never know in the 3-point era what can happen, but I think for me, coming out of the East, I'd have to pick UConn. What do you say to that?
I know we have a show where we shouldn't really agree to have differing points, but I'd have to agree. I just think UConn is too good. I like everything about UConn. I think Iowa State personally should have gotten a 1 seed just purely on the fact that they dominated Houston in the Big 12. It wasn't even close. Houston looked like they didn't even belong in the final in that game. So I think realistically, Iowa State should be playing the winner of Howard and Wagner. But that's not the world we live in. So I think we're going to see Iowa State versus UConn in the Elite Eight. And, just purely on the basis that I'm from Iowa, I'll choose Iowa State winning. But realistically, I think UConn will go ahead and be the team that's going to be representing the East.
Fair enough. That wraps up the East region point of our video today. And next up, we will be going over the South region. Welcome back to the Brotherhood Ballad. Today we're going to be going over the South region. In our previous video, we went over the East region, so make sure to check that out. First off, we have Houston, the number 1 seed, versus Longwood. As I mentioned before, I don't really think any 1 seed is going to get upset as they did last year with Purdue. So I have Houston moving on. An interesting matchup. I think a lot of the 8-9 seeds will be really good games. This game features Nebraska and Texas A&M. I've seen Nebraska in the season have unbelievable shooting nights where they upset Purdue, but I've also seen Texas A&M have their hot streaks as well. I think it's a toss-up. If I were to pick, initially I like Nebraska, but they haven't been playing good as of late, so I would have to go with Texas A&M as my prediction. AJ, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so I think going into this game, I think Nebraska has a slight edge in the fact that their head coach is Fred Hoiberg. Fred Hoiberg is an unbelievable head coach with experience at Iowa State being their head coach, playing in the NBA at the Minnesota Timberwolves, and now being the head coach at the Nebraska Cornhuskers. If we look at how the sports book has it and what Vegas thinks that Nebraska is the 1.5 point favorite. And so, generally with these 8 and 9 games, I think that the 9 seed always kind of gets a little bit dogged in the fact that they're 9 seed. But I really do believe here that just with the coaching staff that Nebraska has, especially in Fred Hoiberg, who's an unbelievable head coach, I think Nebraska is going to honestly give it to Texas A&M. If I were to bet, I would put the house on Nebraska personally.
In the next matchup, I know that you have your ties to Wisconsin. So for Wisconsin, James Madison, a 5v12. Initial thoughts?
Yeah, see, my initial thoughts here are Wisconsin obviously beats Purdue a couple days ago by very slim margin. I think Purdue should have won that game. Wisconsin gets the 5 seed because they beat Purdue with a 22-13 record, to be honest. Wisconsin doesn't win that game. I don't know if they make the tournament. Just seeing how the tournament committee, had their first 4 out with some very questionable decisions. And so I think Wisconsin has a bit of motivation behind them of, sneaking into the tournament. They're playing a James Madison team who, in my opinion, is minimal in talent to compare up to Wisconsin, really. I mean, Wisconsin's used to playing in the Big Ten. They understand how that talent works. So I think we can expect a pretty good result out of Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's got this in the bag, to be honest. I don't think this would be one to bet on the upset.
Yeah, I would have to agree. For the East or for the South region, I believe the upset that I have the most faith in, I would say, is I believe Colorado is going to beat Boise State this week, and then they're going to beat Florida. I mean, that's a 10-7, so it's not a super big upset. But looking at like a double-digit seed, I would say for me, James Madison probably has the best chance to upset, but I don't believe they will. So I think I agree with you. Wisconsin will probably pull ahead for that. So for the 8-9, as we mentioned, that's a toss-up. I have Texas A&M. Alex has Nebraska. And then looking ahead, Duke and Vermont. Duke had a shocker in the ACC tournament. They were eliminated in the quarterfinals, I believe. And so a lot of people, I believe, could be betting against them with Vermont. I don't see it happening. I see it being a close game, but I don't see them pulling ahead. Do you see any upsets other than the one that we mentioned earlier with Colorado over Florida?
I love a good upset. You can always expect good things out of Duke, even though they no longer have Coach K with them. I think I wouldn't personally bet on Vermont to win, but I think out of all the games that are happening in the South region, I think that Duke, Vermont, and Florida, and then the winner of Boise State, Colorado are the 2 most likely chances of an upset. And what I mean by that is because I personally don't consider, hypothetically speaking, if NC State were to beat Texas Tech, I don't view that as an upset, considering NC State beat North Carolina in the championship game for that, which was an upset. Therefore, NC State's hot. They got hot at the right time. So I don't think NC State beating Texas Tech would be an upset. And I also think Texas Tech are frauds in the Big 12. With a 23-10 record, you look at other teams that were the first 4 out that had similar records like Pitt, Indiana State, just to name a few. I think Indiana State should have gotten a nod over a team like Texas Tech, considering what Indiana State did in the regular season. I mean, they had a tough matchup with Drake in the Missouri Valley Conference final in the tournament round of that, where I believe it was 80-85, and Indiana State lost by 5 points. And so my belief is that, when you have these matchups, I think Vermont definitely has the chance to upset Duke. Do I think it's likely? No. Am I rooting for an upset? Absolutely. But if I had to pick one of these two teams, I do believe that Duke is going to squeak out a close win. I don't think it's going to be a blowout whatsoever.
So as we look ahead in the round of 32, so I have Marquette advancing over Western Kentucky. Do we think for Kentucky and Oakland, do you think Kentucky will pull ahead in that game?
I think that's a given. I think we should talk about the Texas Tech NC State game first. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, as you mentioned, NC State's hot. Texas Tech, the Big 12 is one of the toughest conferences, but I think if NC State can just build a good game plan, they must be exhausted after 5 games in 5 days, but they have a little bit of a break here just to get back ready, get their head ready for the tournament. It's a whole different beast than the ACC tournament. So I think NC State will pull ahead. They're going to have a tough matchup against Kentucky, but we've had stranger things happen. So I think mostly in the South region we'll see more upsets than in other regions.
I agree with you.
Especially the East. I think the East will mostly be chalk. But as we move forward, who do you see coming out of the South region going to the Elite Eight? Who do you see?
Yeah, so we run it from the top. I think we see Houston play Nebraska in the round of 32, and ultimately I think the winner of that's going to be Houston. So I see Houston playing. Realistically, I think Houston is going to end up playing Duke Wisconsin to go to the Elite Eight.
I agree. I don't think Duke is. I don't think they're peaking at the. They peaked way earlier. Yeah.
I agree. I don't see a scenario where Houston is gonna lose to more likely than not Wisconsin or Duke, and so therefore I think that the Sweet 16 matchup that is most likely regarding upsets is going to be Houston versus Wisconsin. Obviously, I have my ties to all Wisconsin sports, but Houston, they played like garbage in the Big 12 championship, but every team has bad games, bad nights.
Yeah.
I think one of the teams we can expect out of the South for the Elite Eight will be Houston. And honestly, call me crazy, but I can see the Sweet 16, the bottom half of the South Sweet 16 matchup end up being NC State versus Marquette. That's just my personal opinion. I think we can see an 11 seed make the Sweet 16, especially the run that they've been on recently. They're hot. They're really hot.
Yeah.
And especially in March Madness, all it takes is one win in the round of 64. So I personally think that the Elite Eight in the South is going to be Houston versus NC State or Marquette.
I think Houston, their defense is either going to lead them to the Final Four or a second round exit. That's what I believe.
I can attest to that. I agree with that.
Just because we don't really see defensive teams really go super far. We did see with the Virginia team in 2019, but last year, UConn's offense was unbelievable. But I see Houston, realistically, I see them advancing. I agree with you that Wisconsin will beat Duke. So I see Houston versus Wisconsin. I see Houston going to the Elite Eight. And then I like where your head's at with NC State. I think if they rest up enough this week and don't let the ACC make them really gassed, if they come out of the gate strong against Texas Tech, I see them winning that. Kentucky, if Reed Shepherd has an off game, he's one of their best players. Yeah. They have a bunch of Rob Dillingham. They have a bunch of other good players. But talent doesn't always mean you're going to win the March Madness. So it's if you're hot and if you're connecting on all levels. So I agree with you. I think NC State will upset Texas Tech and then upset Kentucky. I think Marquette is a really strong opponent. So that'll be a good game, NC State versus Marquette in the Sweet 16. But I do see Marquette ending the Cinderella run. So Marquette versus Houston or Wisconsin. I think we picked Houston. Yeah. So in the Elite Eight, Houston versus Marquette, that's a good matchup. Oso Ighodaro is a phenomenal athlete for Marquette. Houston has a lot of good defense. I see either Marquette or Kentucky coming out of the South, but if I had to pick the upset as we did, I would go with Marquette reaching the Final Four in the South region.
Yeah.
Final thoughts for the South region?
Yeah, so my final thoughts for the South region, that being that, for basketball at least, the Big 12 is arguably, if not the best conference for basketball. And so I think just purely on the fact that Houston has had a harder schedule than Marquette, I would say, Houston's faced teams like Iowa State, like Baylor, like these other good teams in the Big 12 that can give them like real hard competition and make them fight for a win. I don't think Marquette's like that. I mean, I know Marquette put up a good fight against Wisconsin earlier in the regular season or in that early December time, but I don't see, purely based off of strength of schedule. Obviously, that doesn't matter when it comes to March Madness, but I just think Houston has proven themselves throughout the entirety of the season, even through the postseason, even losing to Iowa State in the Big 12 championship. I think Houston's like that, and I think we can, we like to see upsets in March Madness, but I really do believe that Houston is a very good and reputable one seed that will come out of the South.
Those are our thoughts on the South region. Thanks for watching. Welcome back to the Brotherhood Ballad. Today we're going to be going over all the regions of March Madness. And now we've reached the West region where my favorite team, Arizona, is the number 2 seed up against Long Beach State. We'll start at the bottom. I think Arizona, if they lose again as a number 2 seed, they're going to get so much hate, and I hope that doesn't happen. But I think they got this over Long Beach State. They're, I believe, 20.5-point favorites on FanDuel. Their future opponent is between Dayton and Nevada, a 7-10 seed. My thoughts, I think Dayton is overrated. I think Nevada is underrated, so I'm going to have to go with Nevada. AJ, what are your thoughts on this potential matchup in Salt Lake City?
I know how much you love Arizona. I think they're cold at the worst possible time a team could get cold. I mean, you don't even make the Pac-12 championship. You lose your last regular season game to USC, to Bronny James and Dennis Rodman's kid. You're supposed to be like a good team. And so I just think, like, what is going on, like, in the inner circle of this team? Like, what is happening to where you're losing these games where they should be very clear and obvious wins? And so my thought is, like, are they really going to do this again? Are they going to lose? I mean, what's stopping them to lose now? They're on a cold streak. They did the same stuff last year. So it's like, I mean, I know how much my co-host loves Arizona, and so me personally, I'm going to use my non-sponsored ad read. DraftKings 64% bet on Long Beach State at plus 1,500 with a $10 bet to win about $250 to be the upset on this game. Do I think it'll happen? I can see it happen.
I can see it happening.
Do I hope it happens? Obviously not. But I think there's a chance, just purely off of how Arizona has gotten cold at the wrong time. They've got good guys on their team that should help them, carry them to a win. You've got Caleb Love, who should carry them to a win, but I don't have a whole lot to say about this. I think an upset is likely. I hope it doesn't happen, though. You look at the top game, being North Carolina versus the winner of Howard and Wagner. I mean, unless I'm just delusional, I don't see why North Carolina deserves a 1 seed over a team like Iowa State, who won the Big 12 decisively against Houston. North Carolina loses to NC State and they still get the 1 seed. I don't see why. I think with Roy Williams, they're not a good team. If we get a 1-16 upset this March Madness, it will be this game. You have Armando Bacot, cool, like, he's good. He's probably going to go to the NBA, but I think Howard or Wagner is going to be that surprise Cinderella story in this 2024 March Madness.
I agree. I think the best chances for an upset are North Carolina. If Purdue gets upset again against who I think will be Montana State, that would be shocking. But I just think I agree with you with that being the best upset. I've mentioned before, I don't think any of the one seeds will get upset in back-to-back years. As we look ahead in Charlotte, Mississippi State and Michigan State, I think this is one of the easier 8-9 seeds to predict. I think Mississippi State is just the better overall team. I think they will take that one, and they will play. I predict North Carolina. I mean, if it is Howard, then I think Mississippi State will move on to the Sweet 16. But I have North Carolina reaching the Elite Eight. With I'll just mention it now. I think Arizona's reaching the Elite Eight, and they're going to beat North Carolina to make it to the Final Four. I think Caleb Love is on a revenge tour. He has one of his teammates, Luke Champion, is number 24, and he put that on his profile pictures that says Champion 24. So he's written it in the cards that Arizona's winning the championship. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. The 5-12 of this West region, St. Mary's and Grand Canyon. I think a lot of people will be betting on Grand Canyon just based off their 29-4 record, but I do think St. Mary's is getting hot at the right time. They did really good in the West Coast Conference tournament. I think there'd just be too much to handle for Grand Canyon. What are your thoughts on 5-12 upset potential?
Yeah. Firstly, I want to go back to that 8-9 game and the fact that if someone out there can please tell me how Michigan State made this March Madness. I mean, I can think of like 8 teams better that had better records, better resumes than Michigan State. Big Ten basketball is a joke. I would love to understand why they made. Like, Tom Izzo is a good head coach, but please, someone inform me why this massacre is about to happen out of Charlotte, where we see Mississippi State win by at least 9.5 points. Like, I don't understand it. I don't see why there's any case of Michigan State deserving to make this tournament. Like I'd mentioned earlier, I would rather see Indiana State play Mississippi State. You'd probably see the same result, but you see a team that's more motivated in Indiana State. They barely lost the fucking Missouri Valley Conference tournament, and I just don't understand the committee. They're like the committee for the college football playoffs. And so, me personally, I'm putting the house on Mississippi State. GCU is in a conference full of nobodies, and so I don't think this is a 5-12 upset.
No.
I mean, Grand Canyon they had a better record like throughout the entirety of the season, but St. Mary's is hot at the right time. Heck, I'd rather even see Seton Hall or St. John's play Mississippi State, regardless. I think if there's a 116 upset, it's going to be this game. I think we both agree on Mississippi State is going to destroy Michigan State. I think we both have St. Mary's in this game. I think GCU can put up a good fight, but yeah. I just don't think there'll be enough for St. Mary's.
Yeah. The next game, Alabama and Charleston. I think Alabama has the best chance of upsetting, whether it be North Carolina or later on if they play even Arizona in the Elite Eight. I think Alabama's offense can lead them. We've seen offensive-led teams make it pretty far in the tournament, but I think they just have the Mark Sears. He's the transfer point guard. He's a really good player. Moving on, the upset I have of the West region is number 11, New Mexico, over Clemson. New Mexico is getting hot at the right time. They did phenomenal in their conference tournament. I think they were rated too low, honestly, and they like to run fast. They like to shoot a lot of three-pointers. Eddie House's son is on that team, same with Jamal Mashburn. I think if they get hot at the right time, they will be able to advance and maybe even advance to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I think that's a good take. I think just doing from previous research and whatnot that the New Mexico team, they play faster than 98% of the teams in Division I. You got Jalen House and Jamal Mashburn who are averaging a combined 30 points a game. Clemson has not been playing well. Clemson have been, losing a lot of their games that mean the most. I think, they got absolutely devastated by Boston College. Boston College has a good football team, but we're not talking about football right now. So I think I think a really another solid, upset that you guys can bet on if you guys are the gambling type would be the New Mexico win over Clemson. I think New Mexico is going to come out hot out of the gates. I think they're ready for a win. And then moving forward to another hot team in the Big 12, we've got Baylor versus Colgate. You've got a Colgate team coming out of New York. I just don't see a scenario where Baylor is going to end up losing to Colgate. I think that Baylor had some really good games in the regular season against Big 12 opponents. I like how Baylor has been playing. Their Big 12 tourney wasn't ideal, but teams, some teams don't just play the best in tournaments, but like postseason tournaments for the conference. But I think Baylor, in my mind, is the clear winner in this game out of Baylor Colgate.
Yeah, they've been respectable in the last couple tournaments, but they just haven't been able to get over the hump. I don't see them getting over the hump in that game. I think if New Mexico State does get past Clemson, I think that game against Baylor will be must-watch TV in Memphis.
Yeah.
I think so. For the West region, we have Arizona and Nevada. If Arizona can get past Long Beach State, I think they will. So Nevada, Arizona, I can see Arizona.
32.
Yeah, I see Arizona getting past Nevada just because I think Arizona just has the depth. And if I think maybe they were a little complacent to end the year. They already knew they were going to make the tournament, so
Right.
I think just Oregon was more hungry in the Pac-12 tournament. You could see it. Oregon was not going to make the tournament if they didn't win the championship. So we'll get to them in the next Midwest region. But for the West region, just to cap off, I think it'll be North Carolina. I think they'll win their side of the region, and I think they'll meet Arizona in the Elite Eight. With that being one of the best games, I think that'll be Caleb Love showing up like he did in 2022 for North Carolina in the Final Four. I think he'll show up and show out and drop 35 plus, and Arizona will make it to the Final Four. What are your thoughts for the West region?
Yeah, I like your thoughts, but personally, I'm dead set on this upset happening. I think we're going to see the winner of Howard Wagner play Mississippi State, where Mississippi State will make the Sweet 16, and they're most likely going to play Alabama. And then the bottom half of the West, I think we're going to see a really, really tight matchup between Baylor and Arizona. I mean, as much as I want to bet on that Arizona-Long Beach State upset, I think Arizona-Baylor is going to be that bottom half of the West in the Sweet 16. So my personal opinion, I think we're going to see Mississippi State versus Arizona in the Elite Eight out of the West. I mean, I know it's a crazy take, but I don't have faith in North Carolina, and I think we look at some big black horse stories or Cinderella stories out of the West. I think Mississippi State has a really good chance at being one of those teams this year like we've seen in the past with St. Peter's or Loyola Chicago.
Florida Atlantic made it as a 9 seed last year.
Yeah, even in FGCU, and I believe that was 2016. I think we have a couple good teams out of the West that can make some really good cases for a Cinderella story.
So Mississippi State, Arizona, who do you have winning that game?
I mean, if I have to pick on the spot, I'm obviously going Arizona to advance out of the West, but I'm one that loves a good Cinderella story. So my Cinderella pick for the West is Mississippi State to make the Final Four.
So that wraps up our West region portion. Thanks for watching.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Brotherhood Ballad, where me and my co-host Justin, we are doing our March Madness preview for each region. We are now moving on to our final region, that being the Midwest, where we see the 1 seed out of this region being Purdue and the 2 seed being Tennessee. Now, we are looking at the 1 and 16 seed being Purdue, being the winner versus Montana State versus Grambling, which I personally believe that Purdue will be playing Montana State. Purdue loves to choke. So are we going to see a Montana State upset? That's the question.
I think in back-to-back years, the Purdue's coach's job would be in question if he goes back-to-back years losing. I don't see it happening. Personally, I think out of either the 1 or 2 seed losing, I don't really see those losing. But as we get through this region further, I have a lot of double-digit seeds advancing to the round of 32 and the Sweet 16s. But we'll get to that shortly.
Yeah, so if you had to, really set in stone what your final thoughts for that Purdue, Montana State, or Grambling game be, what are your final thoughts in that game?
I think Purdue, a lot of the tournament games are close at half. Like it could be like a 30 to 28, something like that at halftime, something close, but I think they'll pull away and win by 20 plus. And then for Tennessee St. Peter's, I think that one will be a little bit close, but I think Tennessee will pull away and win by a substantial margin.
Now that we're in March, who doesn't love a good upset? I think St. Peter's, they've done it in the past. They performed in clutch moments. I think they have the players. I think they have the coaching staff to perform once again. I think that Tennessee-St. Peter's game will be close. I wanted to say that St. Peter's is going to win, but realistically, Tennessee's probably going to beat them pretty comfortably. But, who doesn't love to gamble? And so, in the case of a gambling man, I'd put my money on St. Peter's. Not a lot, but enough to have some fun.
For the 8-9 seed, Utah State and TCU, a lot of the other ones in the region, other regions, I think will be a lot closer. I think Utah State's going to run away with this one. Looking at the 5-12 Gonzaga, this is one of their weaker teams in recent years. So I think a lot of people will be betting on McNeese coming in at 30-3. I think it'll be a close game. This is the 5-12 I probably feel the best about betting on McNeese for. I don't know, confidently speaking, I feel a lot more confident in Oregon over South Carolina for a double-digit upset. But I would say this is a good one to look at. That'll be a Thursday game, one of the earlier games, I believe. Yeah. I think it could be a potential round of 32 of number 13 McNeese versus Samford, because I think KU is fraudulent, especially with Hunter Dickinson and McCullough injured. I think they could play, but they won't be at 100%. So I definitely could see some double-digit seeds moving on to the round of 32 with those teams, as well as Oregon over South Carolina.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Just a side comment that's completely irrelevant to the games. The tournament committee has decided to say that Salt Lake City is now the Midwest and that Pittsburgh and Charlotte are also the Midwest. Interesting when you have Omaha in the East, but here or there. Utah State's got a couple legends. Jordan Love, not the right sport, but Jordan Love is going to be well in spirits with that Utah State team. We love a good Mountain West team. Like I had mentioned earlier, TCU is good. They're a solid Big 12 team. Personally, I think that all the Big 12 teams that are in this tournament have a very solid chance of making it through to the next round of 32. But I do think that in the case of this Utah State TCU game, I think it's going to be a lot closer than, for example, like Iowa State and South Dakota State or Baylor and Colgate. But if I had to pick a team, I'm going to have to go ahead and say that it's going to be not an upset in the sense that the 8 versus 9, and that I will have Utah State being the team that advances to the round of 32 out of that 8-9 game. And moving forward to that 5-12 game, at one point in time, Gonzaga was a good team. They had talent. They had the stars to make it deep into the tournament and make a good run. But I like how McNeese has been performing recently. So if we got to look at a 5-12 upset, I really do like McNeese pulling off an upset here. I think that they have the talent. They have a good center. They have a good starting five. They have good head coaches. They have a good coaching staff. I like how McNeese has been performing recently. And so I think, and another upset alert right here, your black horse, your Cinderella story is McNeese.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. For the rest of the Midwest region, some upsets that I also think will occur. I think Tennessee is a fraudulent 2 seed. So I see them getting upset by Texas in the round of 32. I see Texas moving on to the Sweet 16, having an unbelievable matchup with, I think it'll be Creighton and Oregon in the round of 32. That'll be a great game of bigs. You got Kalkbrenner for Creighton, and you got I can't remember his name, but the big for Oregon that dominated against Arizona. I think that'll be a good matchup. But I see just Creighton being a bit more balanced. And Creighton versus Texas, you got Max Asmus, as you remember, or Roberts a couple years ago. He played for them. Now he's at Texas. I think he'll have a great tournament, but I just see Creighton advancing to the Elite Eight. And then at the top, obviously you have Purdue. You got the big giant Zach Edey. I
don't like Zach Edey. I think he's an overrated big man.
Yeah, I think he's just. I mean, he's a good college player, but he's not going to do much.
I think if he gets drafted, it'll be a late second round pick. If not, he'll get picked up as a non-signed player.
Yeah, I agree. I could see them getting to the Sweet 16 just because I think Utah State will just run out of gas. Purdue, who do you have them going up against? Do you think McNeese can get? Did you have Kansas or Samford?
Yeah, so like I've stated previous times on this show, I like a good upset. But, if Kansas gets their two healthy guys back that didn't play in the Big 12 tournament, which is a major reason why they didn't make a run of anything in the Big 12 tournament, I think Bill Self, I think that Kansas ran program is always a good program. I think they've got an amazing coaching staff. I think they have an amazing starting five. More importantly, their bench. Their bench is a great bench. They've got a good 6, 7, 8 man. So I think assuming all healthy in Kansas, and you've got a motivated Kansas team with Bill Self who's ready to go out and play a game, I think we can see Kansas probably playing Purdue in the Elite Eight. Realistically. Now, if we're looking at like a more upset type of pick, I think we can see the winner of McNeese and the winner of Sanford going to the Sweet 16, where they would ultimately probably play Purdue. But if I had to pick from that top half of the Midwest, I realistically think that it's going to be Purdue or Kansas that are coming into the Final Four. In that bottom half, I think that winner of Oregon and Creighton is probably going to make it to the Final Four in the Midwest.
I think that's a good pick. I think especially with Oregon, how they've gotten so hot to end the year, I could definitely see them beating Creighton. I think, as you mentioned, I think the Oregon-Creighton winner will make it to the Elite Eight. But I think ultimately Purdue will make it to the Final Four. So they're my pick for the Midwest, the winner of the Midwest region. Who would you say initially, if you were having to pick Oregon or Creighton, who do you have going to the Final Four in the Midwest, from the Midwest region?
Oregon's hot, really hot, but I really like Creighton. Personally, we'll do this. Who do I really think is going to make the Final Four out of the Midwest? I think it'll be Creighton. But if I had that sleeper pick, I think Oregon has a really good shot at making out of the Midwest. And we're breaking up our show into segments. And so after this last and final region, we'll go back in one part of our episode where we'll go over East, South, West, Midwest. We'll pick who we think is going to make it to the Final Four out of that, and we'll pick our sleeper pick. But kind of how I've mentioned, I think Creighton will make it out of the Midwest, and I think a good sleeper pick is Oregon.
Yeah, that's our Midwest region breakdown. Thanks for watching.
Yeah. Hello all. Welcome back to the Brotherhood Ballad. It's been a while, but we're back, and we're doing our March Madness preview. I'm one of the co-hosts, Alex.
And I'm the other co-host, Justin.
We've gotten to the point where we are doing who we think is going to come out of each region, and then our sleeper pick for each. And so we're going to go ahead and start out with the East. And you guys can see kind of our rundown and our prediction for each region in previous videos, but here we're just going to do our final picks and our final comments kind of. And so starting out with me out of the East, personally, I think Iowa State will edge out UConn in a close match to determine who's going to come out of the East. And I think kind of like a dark horse or a Cinderella story out of the East that would hypothetically make it all the way would be Drake.
I love Drake as an upset pick. I have them beating Washington State in the opening round. That Iowa State-Drake matchup is one I'm really looking forward to, round of 32. For me, I have UConn coming out of the East region. I think they're the most dominant team in the country.
They are the defending champions too, so it's a good pick.
Yeah. And then I also agree that Iowa State is one of the best teams. If it's not UConn, I think it'll be either Iowa State or Drake. For the West region, who I have coming out, I am, as you can see from my shirt, I'm an Arizona fan, and so I am a little bit biased, but I think even though they've had a bit of a rough end to the season, I think they are deep enough, and they have the star power with Caleb Love, Umar Ballo, Pella Larson, all those guys. I think they will come out of the West. I think they'll beat North Carolina in the Elite Eight. My sleeper pick for the West region, I love Alabama's offense. I think if they Mark Sears, I think if they just have enough momentum, things can happen in the tournament if you get hot at the right time. I think they're a sleeper pick. My upset pick for the West region would be New Mexico. I think they're going to upset Clemson as well as Baylor to move on to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, so here in the West region, I kind of am at a bit of a crossroads because truly I think that there are three teams. I think that, with North Carolina being the 1 seed, it's like, okay, North Carolina should make it all the way. So that's one team. But I think Arizona and Baylor both have better chances of making it all the way to the end, the Final Four. Ultimately, Baylor and Arizona would play each other to determine who would go to that Elite Eight matchup to determine who would go to the Final Four. But if I had to be like, I want one team out of the West, I want Baylor. I think the Big 12 basketball is the best it's ever been right now. But, if Baylor or Arizona make it, not going to be surprised. And if I had to have a sleeper pick, it'd probably be New Mexico because ultimately I believe that New Mexico and Baylor are going to be playing each other in the round of 32. And so Arizona is known for losing when they're at a high seed. And so I think high seed meaning like they're at the top of their region. And so I think if we see that upset, it's going to be with New Mexico and Arizona. But ultimately, my final pick, it's hard. I personally, just because I don't want to agree with my co-host, I have Baylor making out of the West, with New Mexico being the sleeper pick per se coming out of the West. Moving forward to the South region, we've got some good teams coming out of the South. Obviously, Houston being the 1 seed and Marquette being the 2 seed, Kentucky being the 3 seed. And now my co-host and I, Justin, have both agreed that Kentucky is probably a fraud 3 seed. And so I like an Elite Eight matchup where it is Houston versus NC State. I think NC State has a very good chance at upsetting Marquette. And so we're looking at that Elite Eight matchup of Houston versus NC State. Realistically, I think Houston's coming out of the South. But if I had to pick, that upset that we've been talking about, I really, really like NC State at 11. Just based off of how the committee has ranked all the other teams in the other regions, I think NC State kind of got a little bit dogged at that 11th spot, especially after they beat the 1 seed in North Carolina in the ACC tournament final, which if you watch our previous episodes, you'll know that I don't think North Carolina makes it out of the round of 64.
Yeah, I like a lot what you said. NC State, I think, is a valid upset pick. For me, I think Kentucky, if they don't lose to NC State in that round of 32, I think they can make it to the Elite Eight. I think they're better than Marquette if Reed Shepherd and all of those guys are playing to the way they could. Marquette, Tyler Kolek, I think, was dealing with some injury problems. So if he's healthy, I think they can definitely make it to the Elite Eight. But for me, my pick would be Kentucky versus Houston in the Elite Eight, with Houston edging them out. I think if their defense is just they're able to swarm the ball, I think they'll be able to make it to the Final Four. I could definitely see Kentucky winning as well, though. And then the upset pick, like you mentioned, I would have to agree. NC State, I think they're getting hot at the right time. I think one more upset pick, I could see James Madison beating Wisconsin as a 12 seed because those happen every year.
Yep, they do.
But I think Wisconsin is a valid team, but that's just one of the ones that I like the most. So those are my thoughts for the South region. For the Midwest region now, wrapping up the show, I think Tennessee is going to get upset by Texas in the round of 32. I think Oregon and Creighton will be a great round of 32 matchup, probably the best of the tournament just because how hot Oregon is at this moment. I think the Midwest will be the most potential for upsets, as Kansas could be on the ropes down to the wire, but I think they will pull it out eventually. I think McNeese will upset Gonzaga, so that'll be my sleeper pick. And then Purdue, it's always a toss-up. I could definitely see them losing to Utah State in the round of 32. Do I think it will happen? No. But for me, personally, I think Texas will beat Tennessee. Creighton will beat Oregon. And then Creighton versus Texas, that'll be a good matchup, but I do see Creighton just having a bit more depth. They're reaching the next round. And then I can see Purdue and Creighton. That'll be a great matchup. But at the end of the day, I do have Kentucky reaching the Final Four. And those are my picks for the Midwest.
Yeah, I really like what you've said up to this point regarding the Midwest region. My intuition, like I've stated previously throughout the show, is that North Carolina is losing that 1-16 seed. So I think if we were to see two 1-16 upsets, it's coming out of the Midwest. It's coming Montana State beating Purdue. Looking at the bottom half of the Midwest, who's going to make the Elite Eight? I think Creighton or Oregon have the best shot at making the Sweet 16 out of that bottom half of the Midwest. You look at the top half of the Midwest, I think that Sweet 16 matchup is more likely than not going to be either McNeese versus Purdue or Kansas versus Purdue. I mean, if there is that upset, it's going to be Montana State versus Utah State, where I think Utah State will make the Sweet 16 and probably face the winner of the McNeese-Gonzaga game. Sorry, the winner of McNeese State and Kansas. So I think a good Elite Eight matchup for the Midwest is either going to be Oregon and Creighton versus probably the winner of Kansas-Utah State. But, I love good upsets and whatnot. But I realistically think it's probably going to be Purdue versus Creighton. But if I had to do, what I want, I would love to see Oregon versus Utah State in the Elite Eight. If I have to pick one team coming out of the Midwest, I'm going to go ahead and I don't have one set team, but I'm either picking Creighton or Oregon. And so we move on to our Final Four matchups, where I'll go ahead and start us off with the East-West. I truly believe that Final Four matchup out of the East-West is going to be Iowa State versus Arizona, where I'm from Iowa, so I would love to see an Iowa team win win it all. I have no bias towards any Iowa team, so it wouldn't matter. So making it to this to the championship. Coming out of the East-West side, I have Iowa State, and coming out of the South and Midwest, I have more than likely going to be Iowa State versus Houston, where we get a rematch of not only the regular season Big 12 final day, but we get a rematch of the Big 12 tournament, where Iowa State really gave it to Houston. And ultimately, if I have to pick, I have Iowa State winning it all. But, I think Iowa State has choked in the past several times. But, yeah, if I've got to pick a national championship final game, I'm picking Houston versus Iowa State for it all.
For me, I like that pick. I think seeing Iowa State win would be phenomenal, as we're only a couple hours away from them. So that would be cool just to be able to go and celebrate. I think for the East region, as I mentioned, UConn, their matchup versus Arizona will be a dogfight, I believe. I mean, my heart wants to say Arizona, but my head says UConn, so I have UConn coming out of the East versus West. And then in the South, I've gone back and forth in my head between Kentucky and Houston, who I think is going to make it to the Final Four. I didn't mention Houston; they've just been the better team overall. And then for the Midwest region, I could see Purdue and Houston. That would be a good matchup. I just want to see Purdue. I think they can have a redemption story. Purdue versus UConn. I see UConn taking it again. I just think they're the most talented team. I think back-to-back would be huge for all the people in Storrs, Connecticut. So as my final pick, I have UConn beating Purdue. As far as a score prediction, I would say it would be something like 70-66, a pretty good game.
Yeah, and so we've kind of gave all of our final predictions and whatnot and our thoughts for each of the regions. And so I think you guys can expect from us maybe a Sweet 16 update. Just kind of see how all of our picks have played out and kind of give our back half of the final bracket and, give our final predictions at that point of the Sweet 16. Also, another thing that you could guys maybe expect from us is I personally enjoy watching women's basketball, and so I might go ahead and give you guys a quick little prediction for each region from Albany 1 and 2 and Portland 3 and 4 for the women's. And so that's what you guys can kind of expect to see from us in the upcoming future. But thanks for tuning in. I've been Alex.
I'm Justin.